Hello, America. Welcome to Your Leo Nation, where we believe in and support the rule of law. I am the Chief, Mark Garrett. With us today, again, and I'm very happy to say again, is our friend, our producer, AJ, I call him. I don't think you like that. That's why I use it a lot. But you can call him Anthony Jackson. Anthony, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you, Mark?
Well, you know what? As things go, I'm doing very well. Life is good. And we hope that we keep it that way. We're going to talk about, hey, it's election time, Anthony. We're almost there. So, yeah, we're going heavy election topics here for Your Leo Nation. What's more important than the leadership at the top of the country in regards to law enforcement and respecting the rule of law? So why not? These are interesting times for sure. And we want to get into it. So there's a lot going on right now, obviously, when it comes to the recent nominee for the Democrat Party. And I guess she'll be crowned pretty soon here at the DNC next week in Chicago, which I think we'll probably end up doing a show just on that, because as it looks right now, there's a lot of activity planned outside that arena. And I'm praying that things are peaceful, that things are safe for the public, but we will see.
Her marketing campaign's doing well, so
yeah,
I think she will.
Yeah, well, you know what? Time will tell. Time will tell. But again, I hope the people are safe. But my guess is things are going to be very interesting. I'll put that word in quotes coming up at the Democrat National Convention. So again, we're going to focus on, not exclusively, but we're going to focus in again today on, as it relates to this campaign, specifically to the Harris-Walz ticket, the rule of law. Again, as I opened with, what could be more important than the rule of law as it in regards to the commander-in-chief, the chief executive officer, the president of the United States? It all starts there. It starts with the Constitution, but of course the president is the chief law enforcement officer, executive in the country. So right now we're in a situation, Anthony, where Kamala Harris is undoubtedly and really unabashedly flip-flopping on so many of her past positions, policies, statements, beliefs, groups and people that she supported. She is running away from that. And I'm old enough to see this over and over and over and over. It's not just on the left. It's not just the Democrats. It happens on Republicans too. But we see the left so often trying to campaign to the middle. They get in office and they govern way to the left.
Although pandering.
Total pandering. That's the word. And then, of course, this is beyond pandering now because, again, she's trying to distance herself at every turn from the 3.5 years that she's been in office as vice president, supporting the Biden-Harris ticket, Biden-Harris platform and administration, and now pretending that she's had nothing to do with so many issues, economic, international affairs, which I'm not going to get in today. And that's a whole different encyclopedia. But again, I want to focus pretty much just on the law enforcement aspect here. And I know you brought some things to the table you want to talk about too, and chime in whenever you like there, Anthony. But I want to start with this. So, what's the old saying? I'm paraphrasing, but the best determiner for future behavior is past behavior. And it's a paraphrase, but I got the wrong. Basically, you can kind of count on people doing in the future what they've done in the past. And that's true. It's personal life, professional life, whatever it is, athletic career. That's what you go by. And there's nothing like trying to change history. And that's exactly what's happening right now with not only Kamala Harris, but with Tim Walz and the two of them together. They have a lot to run away from if they want to persuade people in the middle to vote for them. That's exactly what they're trying to do. So from an old timer who was actually in California, as at the time I think I had just promoted to captain or so, when this happened. We had Prop 47. Now, I know we've talked a lot about Prop 47 over the past several months and almost a couple of years in the show. and for people who don't know about Proposition 47 in California, and I'll sum it up here in a minute, but in short, it reduced the penalties for lots of criminal behavior in California. And it's helped to bring California to where it is now. I mean, California it's a petri dish. It's like a depository for video footage of what not to do when it comes to enforcing the law, from the governor's office, from the Department of Justice, the Attorney General's office, the same chain of command there, from local district attorneys. It's an example of what not to do if you want to have a civil society. So let me read this to you. It's very, very short. How Kamala Harris helped create a crime wave in California. This is from a publication, Reform California. Kamala Harris is trying to run for president right now, but as California's prosecutor, in quotes, she was the Attorney General of California. She makes a big deal about that. And now she's saying how tough on crime she was in California.
I was going to bring that up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll bring it up. Hold your thought there, Anthony. I want you to chime in. But she's actually one of the biggest reasons why California is experiencing a dangerous crime wave. Vice President Kamala Harris launched her presidential campaign on Sunday. Now, obviously, this is a few weeks ago, boasting her record as California's prosecutor. However, Harris's controversial record in the state is one of the biggest reasons why California is experiencing a dangerous crime wave. In 2014, as Attorney General, Kamala Harris was one of the leading champions of Proposition 47, which eliminated the ability of police and prosecutors to arrest and punish criminals in California for countless crimes. These were certain assaults. These were theft, lowering thresholds from felonies to misdemeanors. The most famous one, raising the amount of merchandise you can steal from a store, any place, to $950 before it becomes a felony. Anything under $950 is a misdemeanor, and they don't prosecute for misdemeanors pretty much in California.
You can get a good sized TV now for under $950.
Well, you know what? I'm thinking about. I'm doing the numbers, Anthony. I'm thinking I can probably get some kind of like cheap airline ticket to like on Spirit if I get there in one piece at all, out of here from Florida to California, pick up a big screen, ship it back via UPS. My plane ticket back, I'll probably still make like $200 in the deal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So this is what's happened in California. We laugh about it. I'm the first one, to laugh about these things sometimes because they're ludicrous. You can't help but you either have to cry or sometimes laugh about these things. But she was a big proponent of this. It eliminated the ability of police and prosecutors to arrest and punish criminals in California for countless crimes. We're talking about assaults. We're talking about documents fraud. We're talking about all kinds of things that the day before were felonies and now became misdemeanors. And then many of, like I said here, many of which are not even prosecutable anymore. It's crazy. Carl DeMaio, chairman of Reform California and candidate for state assembly, says Harris even lied to voters by giving Prop 47 a false and misleading ballot title that suggested it was a quote-unquote tough on crime initiative. The title read, Criminal Sentences, Misdemeanor Penalties, Initiative Statute. This began the practice of state attorneys generally approving misleading ballot titles. Last paragraph, because of Kamala Harris and Prop 47, a crime wave has hit California, with our communities across the state experiencing unexpected spike in both retail property crimes as well as violent crimes ranging from assault, rape, and murder, said DeMaio. Well, people may ask, well, Mark, how does lowering the felony threshold from, or raising it from this number, I think it was $500 to $950, how does that affect rape and murder? Ladies and gentlemen, the reason is because people who commit rape, commit murder, are almost always involved in other crimes. So if you could arrest them for a felony for property theft, prosecute them for felony, you're able to put them in state prison. It means they can't commit rape and murder or other serious crimes. That's why Prop 47, which Kamala Harris not only promoted and pushed, but she helped disguise as a tough on crime law. That's why she's responsible for so much literally death and destruction and mayhem in California. So this is one example of what this woman stands for and what she would like to bring to all of us on a national level. And Anthony, I know you wanted to chime in there when I talked about one aspect of that, so have at it.
Yeah. So I'm trying to, because there's a consensus around with the left wing people, and it's hard to get through our message to them. And I'm trying to get like through their perspective, and they think that being tough on crime is causing more crime. They think that. They think that it's not giving people a chance. And they also think that criminals are doing it because they're poor and, you know, all this other stuff. So can you explain to people out there the reason why that is like a fallacy?
Well, I'll tell you,
From your
two things. Yeah, why it's a fallacy, and I'll tell you why so many on the left believe this. They believe this because they have been taught, either in our schools or by other institutions, for at least a generation now, and longer than that, but at least a generation. Let's just say a generation now. They've been taught that it's someone else's fault, your predicament in life, your situation. This is the basis for all of this. This is the foundation for exactly what you're asking, Anthony. Why is this the case? They've been taught that people are either oppressors or victims. It's being taught now. It's being taught in so many public schools. It's being, God forbid, it's true. It's being taught in churches. It's being taught in private industry with DEI. Everybody is an oppressor or they are oppressed. They're a victim. White privilege is a prime example right there. Hey, it's not your fault what you're doing. It's because of white privilege. Either white privilege right now today because your boss is white and you're not white, or the cop is white and you're not white, or this person's rich, they're white and you're not white. White privilege today, or historical white privilege going back to the founding of this country, or beyond that, going back to Western European history. Everything is tied to the oppressor-oppressed model. Everything. So when you do that, you can explain away any behavior. You can blame it on somebody else. Why is it a fallacy? I'll tell you why it's a fallacy. I've said it 100 times. I'm going to, hopefully before I die, I'm going to say it another 1,000 or 10,000 times. My dad is a prime example of why that model is a lie. It's a fallacy. It is a deflection. It is an excuse. It is a foil between anarchy and the rule of law. I'll tell you why. My father was born dirt poor, the deep South, black, during the Depression, under Jim Crow. 13 years old. He's on his own. His mom had been murdered. His dad's out on the road. He's not at home. He's by himself, and he takes care of himself. Why did he survive? Why did he succeed? Why did my father thrive? Why was he able to buy 3 homes, put 4 of his 5 kids through college, end up a plant manager, a large manufacturing facility, a company? Because he played by the rules. By the way, the rules under Jim Crow, I don't know where that came from. I need more water. Jim Crow, the true oppression for black people, the 1930s in Dallas, Texas. I mean, can you imagine? I can't imagine. My parents told me about this over and over and over, but I still can't really appreciate it because I wasn't there. But I know it was horrendous. My father was a person who could not ride in the front of the bus. He was the person who rode in the front of the bus. By the way, my dad hardly rode the bus because he couldn't afford to ride the bus. My dad walked, or he carpooled, so to speak, with friends of his when they could. But my dad succeeded because even though the rules were completely slanted against him and blacks of the Deep South in the 1930s, he still played by the rules. So guess where my dad did not end up? He didn't end up in jail. He didn't end up in prison. He didn't end up dead with a gunshot wound to the head because he was in a firefight with another gang member. And as time progressed, thank God things got better. My dad got out of the army in World War II. Things can continue to get better. And he's raised his 5 kids. I always say 4 good ones and me. as he raises 5 kids, as my mom raised their 5 kids, they made sure to the best of their ability that we played by the rules. We could complain about it. We could come to an agreement that this rule is not fair or this person is not a good person and blah, blah, blah. It's got to be fixed. But we still played by the rules, so we didn't make things worse than they might be out there. And things are not perfect even today. But that's why this is how it came. It's oppressed and oppressor. And it's a fallacy because almost everybody who plays by the rules, first of all, won't end up in jail or prison. And they will be successful like my parents were. So I'm glad you asked the question, Anthony. And that's my, yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask you this? So do you think that this is more of an indoctrination that's been playing out over the years, like for either certain cultures, like for instance, you have rap music that's perpetuating the idea of being anti-cop, pro, gang member shooting, just degenerate behavior, and also, like you said, it's being taught in our schools. So this idea of being either an oppressor or a victim is just being instilled in our children, and it's becoming like hardened in our society, and that's what's creating this kind of weird crap coming up.
Yeah.
Ideas.
Well, you asked specifically about rap music and rap music as, and again, not all rap, obviously.
Of course, I
listened to, I liked Run DMC back in the 1980s. That's how old I am. And there are some. I'm not a big rap fan, but there
Just
is
talking in general.
Yeah, I know. But it's an interesting point you raised because institutions, I use that word talking about artists, institutions like rap music and things like this, I don't blame them for the cause. I certainly, the people who are using the most horrible language about Black people, about women, about things that they want done to cops, this is unacceptable. Of course, it's absolutely it's disgusting and it's a cancer in society. But I don't blame rap music for the start of this. This is an expression. This is an expression of a culture that's been developed. That's what it is. So that's part of the problem. Again, I know you use that as a very fine point example. So rap music, I'm not calling out all rap music, things like this. We're talking about specifically those groups, artists, the words that are detrimental to the rule of law, to civil society.
The reason why I bring that up specifically is because Kamala Harris is using the music industry to really funnel in people into her campaign. So it's kind of like starting from left field, and these people are seeing people that they worship or idol supporting Kamala Harris, and then boom, it's like a funnel that happens.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm kind of bringing that up too. So
yeah, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt that that's part of it. And by the way, listen, everything like that in a campaign is totally fair game. If you want to use on the other side, Donald Trump, Republicans to the same, I don't know, same degree, but in the same vein are using musical industry to their advantage from their point of view, and that's all fine. But the more important point about what the Harris campaign is doing with it is like, where did this all start? And this all goes back. In fact, I was just talking to a buddy yesterday about, they were talking about DEI and things like this. I see certainly DEI right now is, the pinnacle of all this stuff. But it goes back way beyond that. It goes back to affirmative action as far as I'm concerned. And in between affirmative action and DEI, we have multiculturalism chronologically. And I think multiculturalism, affirmative action, I think started in a good place. I don't think it turned out to work as intended, things like this. But I just don't think, again, I'm 61 years old, so I really have a good life perspective on the evolution of all these topics here. And I think that affirmative action really started in a good place. It started, good hearts, good intention, but it certainly did evolve into multiculturalism. And this is where I think there was the real turning point. And this goes back to the oppressed, oppressor, oppressor, oppressed, whichever direction you want to use it. Multiculturalism was the first real implementation of balkanizing this country. In other words, dividing this country up, placing people in different boxes based on whatever immutable characteristic you want to pull out. So skin color or ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, multiculturalism. And I said it 30 years ago on the High of Patrol. We start getting some multiculturalism training, or I won't say training, but exposure, things like this. And I thought, it's not even real, because the only cultures that were being promoted as wholesome or as productive, sin-free, whatever you want to call it, were everything except for Western culture. Western culture was the redheaded stepchild that always got beat up, always. And when multicultural later on, they did go to multicultural training. And this was the balkanization of America. This is where it all started, and it's evolved into what we have right now. And this is where Kamala Harris and sorry, the Democrat Party, people say, oh, the left wing. There's no left wing in the Democrat Party now.
No.
The Democrat Party is the left wing. It is the multiculturalism. It is the DEI. It is the oppressed oppressor model. I'm sorry, that's the leadership. Kamala Harris, we look back and we're going to talk about this. We're going to show you the footage. In her own words, she's neck deep in all of this stuff, dividing people based on group think. And this is where all of this stuff has affected the rule of law, because once you start dividing people up and assigning different levels of responsibility and culpability based on their skin color, based on national origin, based on whatever, again, immutable characteristics you want to pull, if they're left-handed or right-handed, then the rule of law, by definition, is diminished, because it cannot be objective. It cannot have that blindfold on like Lady Justice in most courtrooms, I think, still today. That's what the rule of law is supposed to be, blind. Has it ever been 100% blind? No, of course not. Is it less blind now than it used to be? Absolutely. So with this said, right now, want to move on. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, yes.
You're probably the point where you wish you hadn't asked it, because you needed a break. But I am. It's so important. So let me move on here. So we know that Kamala Harris was one of the instigators and supporters, promoters, champions of Prop 47. And by the way, that was just one I just touched on, of policies and laws in California. We can talk about the cop who was shot in San Francisco. We can talk about evidence that was not revealed to defense. We can talk about so many things. What I'm trying to get out here is the foundational, the platform of what Kamala Harris is. Just a platform, so everybody understands what she stands for in general. We could talk about the specifics, niceties forever and ever and ever, because there's so much there. But I do want to move on here. I'll keep this train going here. This is from Fox News. Kamala Harris donated to anti-police, pro-sanctuary city group as D.C. struggled with crime. Now, first of all, she helps implement laws in California that have destroyed California, that have cost untold billions of dollars in property loss, untold number of people assaulted, assault and battery, rape, murder, on and on and on and on. So she was part of that implementation. And now she donates to anti-police, pro-sanctuary city, which, by the way, let's listen. I know this audience is sharp, because I get the comments. I want to hear from people maybe on the other side of the aisle. I want to hear how many times between now and November 5th, Kamala Harris comes out in support of sanctuary anything. I challenge you. If she's going to support sanctuary city, sanctuary state, I doubt it. And if you can send me something, a video, a link, an article where she's promoting sanctuary cities when she is steadfast about her previous comments about sanctuary cities, including California when she was Attorney General. Let's see if it happens now in the next 80 plus days. I challenge you. So, Vice President Harris and her husband repeatedly donated to an anti-police and pro-sanctuary city nonprofit, according to financial disclosures released by the White House. Should we call it the White Privilege House, or is that too far, Anthony?
You know what? Since Kamala's in, no, she's a DEI hire.
Well, she denies that, and Biden denies that. But of course, he said he was only going to hire a woman of color, so that excludes white men, black men.
Yeah, so you can't really.
So, I'm not sure.
Call it that anymore.
Yeah, you can't anymore. The donations went to Legal Aid DC, a nonprofit law group that provides services to impoverished Washington residents. Sounds all nice. In addition to its work with the poor, however, the group has called for slashing police budgets and decreasing patrols in high crime areas. That's right. There's a fire over there. It's burning out of control. So let's send the fire engine over there to the beach. That's what they want to do.
Then they say that there's no fires because
that's right.
There's none to report.
There's none to report. And by the way, and that's totally happened.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "We are concerned, especially given the ongoing protest movement." Now, again, this is a little while back, about any solution that involves more police and policing in DC public housing. Hashtag Black Lives Matter DC, unquote. The group's official X account, then Twitter, tweeted just days after the death of George Floyd in 2020 in response to a report that the city's top prosecutor was suing its housing authority for its alleged failure to confront drug and gun crime. Less than a week later, the group condemned a proposed budget increase for Washington's Metropolitan Police Department. Quote unquote, Legal Aid joins a call to reduce funding for police and reinvest in communities, the group posted. So these are financial documents released by the White House showing that Ms. Harris and her lovely husband were sending money to this group that wants to defund police, that wants to increase sanctuary cities, so forth and so on. Moving on in this article. So in 2023, the same year Washington, D.C.'s mayor had to declare a state of emergency regarding youth crime, Kamala donated to a group committed to defunding the police, said Paul Morrow, a former NYPD inspector. The result of this can be seen in the sweeping crime reform bill our capital city has had to pass recently in order to counteract naive, destructive agendas from public servants who behave more like campus activists. This from a prosecutor? No wonder our cities look like they do. So maybe some of you don't remember, but last year they had to pass this sweeping reform bill in Washington, D.C. to increase patrols, increase funding, try to get the crime back under control in D.C. Do you remember? I don't know, maybe you remember this, Anthony, or not, but it was huge. So the mayor there had to go ahead and reverse her position because she was a big supporter of defund and all these things. So here we are. So this is a flip-flop, no doubt, for the mayor of Washington, D.C. and other groups there whose homes and property were being vandalized and stolen and so forth and so on. This is a canary in the coal mine for Kamala Harris because, as we're going to see, she's flip-flopping like the flip-flops that I wear so often here in my beautiful beach community.
Joe Biden wears at the beach.
I wish she would wear a shirt. I saw Joe Biden at the beach, a video of him. One of his 6 or 7 days he spends on vacation every week.
Yeah.
He was down there last week, and he was topless. And
he
I almost
like
called
an ice cream that he eats.
He looked like the ice cream. I think he's morphing into his vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
I think it's a vanilla ice cream metamorphosis. Anthony's happening because exactly what he looked like. He looked like an ice cream cone with no cone in the bottom, just a pair of shorts, and looked like kind of like SpongeBob. Yeah, SpongeBob. Thank you, SquarePants. Yeah, there we go. That's what he looked like, but it was so bad. It was so bad. It looked like, I don't know, too mean, but I wanted to call 911 from my home to rush them to Joe's Beach because that's how bad it looked. But anyway, let me continue with this. In November 23, Washington Mayor Muriel Bowser declared a public emergency over youth violence. In the first 9 months of 2023, there have been 458 arrests of juveniles for robbery, including carjacking, homicide, or assault with a dangerous weapon, 10% more than the total number of such arrests in 2022, her office revealed at the time. And it wasn't just a youth problem. And the article goes on and on and on and on. I'm going to finish this with this. This also shows that the charge that Kamala Harris did nothing as President Biden's border czar is indeed not true, Merle said. While unvetted illegals flooded our borders in prison gangs like, I can't pronounce the name, Trende Aragu established a presence here, Kamala was funding a group to make our capital city a permanent sanctuary city. Those of us who got that wrong stand corrected. Of course, he's being sarcastic. She did do stuff she let more people in while she was border czar, including into Washington, D.C., and many of those people committed murder and other heinous crimes. But I'm trying to lay this out, ladies and gentlemen, that she was part of an initiative in California, an initiative of many policies and laws that has ruined California crime-wise, public safety-wise. Then she moves on to actually fund anti-cop groups, anti-law groups, anti-rule of law groups. This is what she's done. This would be like, she was attorney general. She was the top cop, so to speak, in California. This will be like me sending a $10 donation to the Ku Klux Klan. This is what it would be like. You're supposed to be the top cop. You're supposed to be anti-criminal behavior. You are initiating and instituting and supporting laws in California that make it easier for people to commit crime and then make it more difficult to prosecute crime. Then you donate to people that are bailing out people, and I just haven't gotten to that. You're supporting people who want to defund police and increase the number of sanctuary cities in this state, in this country. This is the real Kamala Harris. And I got in front of myself here with the next topic and last one on her. But I want you, Anthony, are we there yet supporting? I'm going to read this right here real quick. Let me read this, and we're going to play a short video. Actually, I'll tell you what, Anthony, why don't you play clip 1 right now for me?
Okay.
Play clip 1.
Harris sending this out on X. If you're able to chip in now to the Minnesota Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota.
Thanks to Harris's promotion, the group reportedly raised $35 million in just a few weeks.
Darnica Floyd, charged with second-degree murder for stabbing a friend to death. She got out of jail, too. A twice-convicted rapist, currently charged with kidnapping and sexual assault, and he walks out, too.
The Freedom Fund raked in donations when it was promoted by many, including now Vice President Kamala Harris.
Sean Michael Tillman shot and killed a passenger on a train platform after reportedly being released from jail 3 weeks prior. All thanks to the Minnesota Freedom Fund.
Donovan Boone was charged with breaking into the home of an ex-girlfriend and choking her. Freedom Fund bailed him out for $3,000 cash, and he hasn't shown up for court since.
I often don't even look at a charge specifics when I bail someone out.
The Hennepin County attorney called out the Minnesota Freedom Fund for bailing Mosley out of jail twice previously, even though he was arrested for having a gun in the courthouse.
The Minnesota Freedom Fund, which pays cash bail for low-income criminals, paid Tims's entire $10,000 bail in cash.
11 days later, police found a man bleeding from the head and ears in this alley. Police were able to arrest Tims in connection to this violent assault.
Howard was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The Minnesota Freedom Fund acknowledged supporting Howard's bail.
that video, Anthony, thank you for playing that. That's a Trump ad. And again, if there's anybody out there listening who wants to challenge the accuracy of that ad, I would love to get it in the comments. I would love for you to send that to me and straighten me out. But with that said, I want to back that up, not only with what Kamala Harris did, but Kamala Harris's response to the charge that she did back that group, promoted it. This is from the Daily Caller. Harris wrote entire blog post encouraging people to donate to bail fund that freed future murderers. Harris promoted the Minnesota Freedom Fund, an organization that has since used donor contributions to bail out violent criminals, in a May 2020 blog protest, a blog post. Being ahead of myself again here. Harris encouraged her readers to help the protesters on the front lines, so forth and so on. That's a quote there. Let me skip down. This is a quote. Today, in solidarity with those protesting, I am asking for your help if you are able, Harris wrote in her 2020 blog post. Will you make a contribution to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, an organization working on the ground in Minnesota to post bail for arrested protesters? Prosecutors in Minneapolis burned down or otherwise damaged over, you know what, I think they left the word out there, say over 1,500 locations in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, costing an estimated $550 million in damage, according to the Star Tribune. 2 people died during the riots, and law enforcement arrested 604 people between May 24th and June 2nd, a BuzzFeed News reported. I'm going to stop right there. And Anthony, again, chime in wherever you like. I know I'm talking fast here. There's so much.
Can I ask you this?
Absolutely.
We just did a podcast with Gil Carrillo, the retired homicide detective that caught the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to knowingly know Richard Ramirez was murdering and raping kids and stuff, right? I knew of this and I funded him. I gave him money to go out and do this stuff. Would I be held accountable to some degree in the court of law, or would I just be? I'm just asking. It might be a bad example.
Are you asking specifically as far as bail is concerned?
Well, yeah, I'm kind of using that.
Yeah,
analogy. It's like she literally got people out who were career criminals and they committed murder. So I'm asking if I were to fund Richard Ramirez, knowing that he killed people, would I be held to some degree accountable for funding him and allowing him to do that?
Well, only and hopefully only in a public, in a political sense, you would. Again, if someone's eligible for bail, whatever the crime is, and anybody can contribute to that bail or pay the bail. But I want to be clear about something. The article says here, in other words, some of these people went out and committed just straight up first-degree murder later on with no association with the riot scenes like this. And I get that. In other words, I'm not holding Kamala Harris, I'm not holding her responsible for actions that some of these people who got bailed out took after the fact. I in no way hold her accountable for that. There's no way she could know what's going to happen in the future.
Of course.
However, what she is watching, what she was watching on television, like the rest of the country and the world's watching, she was watching officers being assaulted, law enforcement precincts, police stations being burned to the ground, businesses being burned, and yes, this article during the riots, people being killed during the riots, and she is promoting a fund to bail those people out. They were arrested for a reason. By the way, they have right to bail. I want them to have the right to bail. That's fine. Mm-hmm. We all pick and choose our battles. But if you want to bail these people out, that's a life choice that you have to deal with. You decided that's where your support wanted to go. That was your focus. Your focus was not getting on television and say, what in the hell are you doing? Why are you burning down police stations? Why are you looting and burning places of business in your own neighborhood, your own community. I am the attorney general. Actually, at the time, 2020, I guess she was running for office. I guess she still was the senator. I forget what she was in 2020, but she was certainly of some elected authoritative position. And this is how she's using her political clout to bail out the people who are obviously, clearly committing crimes. They had been arrested. If there were, quote unquote, peaceful protesters there, by the way, there were some people who were just marching down the street with their sign up and they were going home.
Sure.
But the people who were violating the law were being arrested, as they should be. And she chose, it's her right, she chose to promote a fund to bail them out. Now, I will say this, Anthony, to your point, she has no idea. If you're promoting an organization that is bailing out these protesters, you have no idea exactly which protester you're bailing out.
It's reckless.
Did they simply violate a curfew law? There was no curfew law at the time. But did they trespass? Did they,
Right.
did
It's
they
like a
break a
blanket.
window? Or was it maybe one of the persons who committed a murder? So you're supporting this fund generally. You have no idea what the repercussions are. To your point, some of these people, a person with a pulse could realize that many of these people that are ransacking places of business, that are burning down police stations, this is probably not the only crime they have committed or will commit in their lifetime. This is anybody with common sense, objectivity, a sense of fair play, any life experience realizes that very few people, thank God, in our society engage in the type of behavior that we saw in Minnesota in 2020, or in Los Angeles, or any place else where I was working in 2020, that behavior. And almost all of those people who do engage in that behavior that we're watching probably engage in that behavior on an all too often basis. What was your point?
So you're saying she pretty much did this for optics at the time, right? Because anybody who puts up their own money for something, whether it be, let's say, a business, for example, you want to make sure that the people that is running the business or running the charity or running, let's say, this fund, are checking the criminal.
Well, they should know. Absolutely.
Stuff.
In other words, they would have to, Anthony, you're right. They would have to know, because when they post bail, they actually have to get the bail amount. It's called
Right.
a bail scale, schedule, or a bail scale.
It shows how reckless and how she just wanted the optics of, hey, I'm on this side, regardless of how the operation was going, who was getting released and stuff like that. So that should just show her character right there. It's like,
yes,
that's
words,
pandering 101.
That's the right word. It's total pandering, because you have no idea. By supporting this organization, you have no idea who they're going to bail out. And again, if you want to pick and choose, any of us as individuals, hey, I'm going to bail out, my good buddy, whatever, for this, whatever. It's
of course
absolutely everybody's right. Absolutely, It's her right too. But don't tell me it wasn't reckless, because you, like you said, Anthony, you have no idea who these people are that you might be helping to bail out and put back on the street. Matter of fact, and the list is long here about some of these career criminals that she helped to bail out, murderers and on and on and on and on. Life, shooting, killing a man at a railroad station, and on and on and on. But these are the people that she is in part, maybe not on purpose, but still, she's in part responsible for helping get out of prison, or out of jail at that point, and go commit more crimes. So, but you're right. It was just pandering. She wanted to grandstand on this particular issue, and we're going to see this in a minute about how much of a panderer she is, how out of touch, and how much she is going to have to completely and continuously flip-flop on this issue between now and Election Day. Let me finish up with this. Go ahead, Anthony.
I just want to say, if she was an actress or, some type of Silicon Valley, entrepreneur doing this, it would be a little different. But the fact that she was the attorney general,
yes,
and she was a top cop, that to me, it it shows a little bit more responsibility on her end, even though, of course, I agree
It
with
should
you.
show.
Yeah.
It should indicate.
Yeah, I agree with you that she shouldn't be held responsible for these people's actions because, again, it's they're making the choice doing this crap, you know? But for her to have all this knowledge of, you know, how criminals act, law, things like that, I hold her a little bit more higher than the average Joe. You know, that's just my opinion. And I hope people see that, you know, come election, that she was doing the exact opposite of what she pledged that she would do, even after her service, putting money into this fund and stuff like that. I hope people see that, but go ahead.
Well, I hope they do too, Anthony. I hope your point is well taken. I hope they see. And by the way, she went from Attorney General in California to U.S. Senator.
Yeah.
You know, and again, supposedly the U.S. Senate, like the Congress, involved in the rule of law, making laws, passing laws.
It's supposed to represent people, right?
Exactly.
Us people, yeah.
Not the rioters. So you would think so. Harris's campaign has leaned on the vice president's experience as a California prosecutor, with one campaign ad touting her record for prosecuting border gangs. Many of Harris's major donors, however, have supported district attorneys who have declined to prosecute crimes. Alex and George Soros, for instance, have both thrown their support behind Harris. I'll say it again. Red flag. Yes. That's an understatement. Alex and George Soros. Again, guys, we can do a show just on George Soros, just on him and his son Alex.
These are literally the elites that everybody hates. They look down on us.
Unfortunately, not everybody, but I'll say this: that George Soros is open. He is proud about his effort, his strategy to undermine the criminal justice system by flooding our society with criminals and criminal behavior. He's open about it, ladies and gentlemen. Alex and George Soros, for instance, have both thrown the support behind Harris, the guy who wants to completely undermine our civil society, introduce as much chaos as he can into the system, and then rebuild it in his image, supports Kamala Harris. The elder Soros is the self-admitted architect. And again, I hadn't even read this far in the article, I swear. I had not read this far. I just said this. The elder Soros is a self-admitted architect of a plan to elect reform prosecutors across the country, many of whom stopped prosecuting what they determined to be minor crimes. The vice president previously supported ending cash bail and reducing penalties for some criminals, according to a memo from her 2020 presidential campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, her 2020 presidential campaign, her tenure as Attorney General, it all speaks for itself. Her donation and support to certain groups, it speaks for itself. So we're going to move on to, as we go down these next few months, we're going to move into the point where it's, well, I did that, but I've changed my mind, or I did that, but I didn't believe at the time, or I never did that. That's a lie. I don't know which tack she's going to use, but it's going to get ugly before it gets better for her, in my humble opinion. With that, I want to close out the Kamala Harris section with Anthony. Can you play clip number 2? And before we play it, ladies and gentlemen, Anthony, go ahead and cue it up. Before we hit play on this clip on Vice President Harris, and at the time, candidate Harris, I believe she was a candidate, she was, for president. I want you to think about this and the point that you made, Anthony, about her previous positions, her previous elected positions, and specifically Attorney General. Juxtapose that to this comment that she makes with Stephen Colbert, that's actually how you pronounce his name, on the Late Show. Go ahead and hit it.
still happening in
Yes.
major cities across the United States. I'm just not seeing the reporting on it that I
Right,
had
that's right.
for the first few weeks.
That's right. But they're not going
now-
to stop. They're not going to stop. And they're not, this is a movement. I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not. And we should not.
I know that there are protests.
Anthony, I don't know where to begin. I did begin. Oh, but look, this is a person who, like the rest of us, and myself being immersed in this in Los Angeles with the riots, she had the opportunity to witness the destruction, the mayhem, the absolute disregard for law enforcement. And here I'm speaking specifically about Minneapolis, where precincts were burned to the ground. In my case, the California Highway Patrol, the CHP was right in the middle of the beginning of the riots in Los Angeles when two of my patrol cars, my officer patrol cars, they were attacked on the 10 freeway in downtown Los Angeles. I actually saw it live happening because people were running out on the freeway, and I had two of my units responding up there, and a 2x4 and a skateboard go through the windows of the car. They injure one of my officers. I suit up in my house and start going code 3. This is what we were witnessing. This is what was going on. These are the same images that she, as she was speaking to Stephen Colbert there, she'd already had the opportunity to witness the incredible breakdown of normality, the lashing out against society, the assaults, the thefts, the flash mobs, the murders, the assault on peace officers. And what does she say in that clip? That they should not stop.
Yep.
That these riots, she probably call them protests, these riots should not stop. Yeah, you tell that to the officers' families who were killed in Minnesota. You tell to the officers, the families of my officers who ended up in the hospital in Los Angeles, that this should not stop. That's what this person was saying. That's what she was saying, that they should not stop. And this is the person who wants to be commander-in-chief, the chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America. And Anthony, I'm going to give you the last word on Kamala because we're going to move on to her partner in crime in a second.
Well, what I have to say about her is just look at what she's done. Look at the video that we just played, and just use two brain cells that you have, slap them together, like you say. Like, come on. Like, what? I think personally that she's going to totally avoid talking about her past. Like, it's not going to be, I don't think she's the type of person that I've seen so far is to admit, oh, hey, I was on this position during this time and I've changed. I'm doing this now. No, this whole thing is not a campaign. It's a marketing campaign. And the news media is just propping her up and helping her, throwing her softballs. Even she can't even do a puff piece with Time Magazine, right? And that just shows that she's totally trying to avoid and mitigate as much questions as she can so there's zero chance of anybody tarnishing what she's built up. It's a base of sticks. There's no structure underneath it, and it's going to come crashing down eventually because, like you said, she has to deal with all this crap. Like, we have the internet, we're literally pulling up receipts right now showing, hey, she took this position and now she's saying that she was tough on crime. No, she supported Prop 47. So my point is that we know and we see her record. The far left know it too. They don't care. The moderates are where she's not going to win them. She's not going to. And the polls and everything that we see, I think they're completely flubbed and made up because it's all about perception over reality. And the only way that, again, this is kind of going down the line, the only way that they're going to win this election is through cheating again, through the through stuff in the polls, the ballot boxes.
I'm with you. I mean, I know I can't see any other way, but again, stranger things have happened. But
of course, yeah.
but
it just doesn't make sense, especially with the moderates, the people that she could win
right.
over, because these videos exist of her literally doing this, saying this crap. So I just don't see it happening. And again, just don't listen to what people say. Watch what they do and what they've done. And I mean, I would even give her a little bit of credit if she were to come out and go, hey, I did say this and I did this, this, and that. It was a mistake.
Yes.
And I'm not going to do this again.
Yep.
But I don't see that happening at all. So
I don't either. I don't either. Like you said, Anthony, this is the person who turned down an invitation, I think, from Time Magazine, who put her on the cover.
Exactly, yeah.
To do an interview. She couldn't even sit down with the softest of softball organizations, so-called media outlets. I mean, Time has no readership anymore. I mean, I don't,
Yeah,
I think maybe the staff reads the magazine every week. That's about it. But she couldn't even sit down with them. No. And that's, if that's not at least some little indication to you, I don't know what else would be. She wouldn't sit down with Time Magazine. It's been almost a month into this, and she's been anointed the candidate. So like you said, Anthony, we have the vids and we have more, but we're going to move on now to her running mate, Tim Walz. And, there's one thing to talk about an individual, about what they've done, and that's so important. That's why we started with her, because she's the top of the ticket. But the old saying is, you can judge somebody to some degree, and I think a very, very significant degree, based on with whom they surround themselves. And I think it's a very, very accurate indication of someone's character, someone's philosophies or beliefs, when you look at with whom they associate. It's just true. So with that said, we just played the video of Vice President Harris and about her really support for and promotion of the ongoing riots in 2020. And I want to roll right into now, because again, we're going, part of the judgment about her is going to be who she's picked as her running mate. That's fair game. So let's do that. And let's take a look at clip number 3 with Mr. Tim Walz, Governor Walz, if you may.
Speaking of and watching yesterday, the whole nature of why we do these things is to allow for that peaceful expression. We saw large, peaceful protests focusing on the systemic changes that get to the heart of why we're in this situation. And when I say we, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the state of Minnesota, nationally, and as we've seen over the last 24 hours, internationally. A society that does not put equity and inclusion at the center of it is certainly going to eventually come to the places where we're at. This is a moment of inflection. It's a moment of real change. It's a moment that those folks who are out there demanding this are not going to take a commission or a report. They're going to want fundamental change. And that is what I think, that's one of the exciting things in the midst of all this. You can feel a sense of optimism coming back.
Stop it. It stopped. Thank God. I was about ready to lose my breakfast. There's so many things in that short clip that this man says. And again, he's the commander-in-chief of Minnesota while these riots are taking place. And I think this is probably day 2. I'm not sure. You guys I can be corrected on that. Day 1, day 2. He said the last 24 hours. So I think we're into day 2. I think it's probably safe to say. And he used words like peaceful protest. Now, at that point, the first day, we know, and I'm not going to get into it. It's all there. I can maybe pull an article up while we're talking today, but we know that the mayor of Minnesota was already in talks with them, or his office, about the National Guard at that point. And so I'm not really sure how peaceful, quote unquote, these protests were in those first 24 hours. I remember they weren't. We talked about peaceful protests, and we know what a scam that whole thing is. You know, we've all seen the images for the news reporter, their anchors out there, the field anchors out there. And yeah, I'm here at these peaceful protests, and all you see is nuclear waste or nuclear, explosions in the background, just orange flames going up, dumpster fires,
people throwing Molotov cocktails.
Yes, and we were all saying it was like an SNL skit in the funny days, not now. 30 years ago when it was funny, but that's one thing for a slanted, biased media outlet to make claims of peaceful protests when it's just, they're showing the evidence on their own platform that they're lying to you. That
textbook gaslighting right there.
Yeah, textbook gaslighting. Absolutely right. It's another thing for the commander-in-chief, the governor, the chief law enforcement officer in a state to say those things. They're both bad, and one's much worse.
Yeah,
one's much worse. He also talked about, and this goes back to earlier, you had raised this question, Anthony, about, kind of where it all start. We're talking about rappers and the language and the sentiment and a lot of the song. And by the way, not just rappers, by the way, there's other things that do the same thing. And I talked about the evolution. In other words, how do we get here? Going back to affirmative action, which I thought started in a great place. And then we went to another place, it evolved into multiculturalism.
Mm-hmm.
And then it evolved into what? DEI. And what did he say? That basically something to the effect, we can go back and watch or whatever, but something to the effect that, this is going to continue or whatever until everybody feels equity and inclusion. He left the D off. In this case, I think D would stand for destruction, equity, and inclusion. But he said equity, inclusion. Point is this: we can see how indoctrinated people have become.
Mm-hmm.
When during the Rodney King riots, certainly understood where the rage is coming from, but no one attributed this to equity, inclusion. That here we are, the first response of the governor of Minnesota, ground zero for the George Floyd riots, is interjecting equity and inclusion in a group criminal activity. I'm sorry. We all have the right to peacefully and lawfully protest. There's nothing in the First Amendment that gives you the right to commit crimes while you're doing it, to damage other people's property, to commit theft, to injure people, to assault these officers or anybody else. There's nothing there in the Constitution that allows that. These were, for the most part, not every single person, I'm talking in total, these were illegal actions taken by groups of people, individual people. But he could not resist interjecting DEI into these protests. This ties right into the previous video that we watched with Kamala Harris when she was telling Colbert that these riots are going to go on and on. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop.
They should not.
They're going to keep going. And they should not stop. They should not stop. And then he talks about how it's all equitable. Here is the worst part about this. And you're watching this podcast, you're listening to it, you can rewind right now very easily. We don't need to go back and play the clip. He called these riots exciting. He goes, it's very exciting. Very exciting. Well, yeah, I was excited too when my ass was out there on the skirmish line downtown. I was excited too, but not in the way that he meant it. My excitement was mixed with anger and a little bit of fear when you're out there with your officers in skirmish lines. That's excitement too. That's not the type of excitement that he's talking about. He was actually gleeful about it. Go back and watch his expression when he talks about being excited.
Mark, when you were out there on the skirmish line, you weren't thinking about equity and diversity and inclusivity during the.
Well, you know what? Actually, to an extent, I was, because I was thinking that to use one of Kamala Harris's taglines that she was supposed to be responsible for the border. I was thinking about it how in regards to how was some of the root causes. It was a root cause, the DEI stuff. the oppressor and oppressed. Yeah, so I was thinking in that way about it.
How does it feel to be the oppressed and the oppressor at the same time?
At the same time, boy, that is funny, Anthony. That is funny. I'll tell you what. The funny thing is, I use that word "funny" in the meaning of interesting. The interesting about that is that even with all the history talked about with my dad and the things I saw happen, I literally, when I was growing up in the 70s with my dad, I saw my parents discriminated against. I saw it. I saw my dad turn away from a hotel room once because he was black. I saw this happen. So this whole thing of, you're lucky, no, I experienced all that crap. I experienced watching my dad be called the N-word in the community we lived outside of Los Angeles. I experienced all this stuff, folks. But here's the thing. And my brother who's 7 years older than I am, he experienced a lot more stuff than I did. So we don't need to hear about that, about, you just got lucky or you're in denial or blah, 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 whatever. Let me tell you the difference. The difference is, as ugly as those things were, what I never saw myself as, and my father didn't see himself as either, was a victim. It doesn't mean that you are not victimized. It doesn't mean that you are not targeted because of skin color or whatever like that. That's not what I'm talking about. If you see yourself as a victim, then you will start to become a victim every single freaking day of your life. And like a cancer, you will cause that to spread to people around you. It's not that none of us cannot be victims. The difference is, if you live in a victimhood mentality, you are cursing yourself to failure and misery. You have to see yourself as being a part of an imperfect world, and yes, an imperfect society, and yes, an imperfect United States of America. But there's no perfect place in this world. None. Zero. Period. I love Florida. I love the Panhandle where we are. I love it. And it's terribly imperfect. So if you see yourself as a victim, you're very likely to become one. If you see yourself as a target of someone to be a victim, and then you deal with it and overcome it, you slough it off, you go on the next day for the most part. There are things worse than other things, I get that. But you can decide to be a victim, or you can decide to move forward even though horrible things can happen in your life, period.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Whatever you choose, either way, you're right in your own reality.
It's beautiful.
And I just for an example, I have a family member that he has that mentality that things happen to him because of his race. Mm-hmm. And it goes down to getting cut off on the road, even though he has tinted windows. It's like, how does that person know that you're, a different color than them? It just doesn't make sense. But to them, in their head, they're correct. So it really comes down to your own peace in your own mind, and either way, you're correct. So you might as well just live the other route where you're not the victim, and again, you're overcoming these things no matter what it is, and it's just more of a positive reality for you. But people choose the other way for certain reasons. We can go down those rabbit holes, but exactly right. I just wanted to throw that in. Either way,
I'm glad you did, and I think you summed it up very well, Anthony. So he talked about it being exciting and a sense of optimism while he's watching. Weird. Very weird. While he's watching the largest city in his state burn to the ground.
What about his wife leaving the window open, smelling the burned tires?
I almost wanted to put that clip up, Anthony, or that piece up. And for those of you who don't know, and you can. I mean, you pretty much said it.
Yeah, just take her word for it.
Yeah, but we can put it up. His wife is talking about she left the windows up to smell the burning tires because she thought it was inspiring. I don't know what it was. Bizarre.
Yeah, it's very bizarre.
It's bizarre. You know, I don't want to smell burning tires from a junk burn a mile away, let alone as a result of the city burning down. But she wanted to smell the burning tires.
I can understand napalm in the morning, but burning tires, like, that's weird. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's pretty good. That's a good reference for somebody so young like you. That's pretty good. But so I wanted to tie those two video clips back to back and let you know that Kamala Harris, if she didn't do anything else right, she really went out and found a soulmate politically. She really did. She found a political soulmate. She found her lieutenant philosophically. There's no doubt. I don't think you can put a piece of paper between them politically. I mean, I think they're tight. Yeah. But I want to move on to another clip of Walz, and this goes into the leadership. We talked about we talked about the roles that people are responsible to engage in when they're in a particular position. Your attorney general, it should be, hey, we got to stop crime, fight crime, put people who are dangerous to society behind bars, things like that. What did Kamala Harris do? Oh, by the way, unless you were smoking marijuana, then you went to prison in California. But anyway, sorry, I digress. And there's another part of this, of leadership, is that you have to make decisions, whether they're popular or unpopular, based on the circumstances. And if you're governor, you have to make those decisions regardless of the political fallout. You should be making those decisions based on what you think. You could be wrong, you could be right, but what you think is best for the people of your state. And first and foremost, for their safety. You should be making that call. Now, I'm going to set this clip up. This is really important. This is about leadership, and it's about honesty, ladies and gentlemen. It's about owning. We all make mistakes. We all say things, whatever, but we all have the ability to own it or deflect it, blame somebody else, become a victim, become the oppressed, whatever, slough it off, excuse it. Just own it and say X, Y, Z. Let me have you play this clip number 4, Anthony. I'll set up a little bit. This is about the National Guard deployment or lack thereof. Now, this is not specifically about 2020. What I love about this clip is it happened. It's from Minnesota. I got it from Minnesota, a Minnesota news station, a local station, and they're talking about the deployment of the National Guard. They're talking about specifically about martial law in Minnesota, basically the legalities of it and what the powers are and things like this. It has nothing to do at this point with George Floyd. I think it's the year before the George Floyd riot, so it's actually perfect. So in other words, it's very clean. There's zero political connection. There's no bias in this. It's just talking about specifically about the governor's ability to take certain action under certain circumstances. With that said, go ahead and play it.
Well, you've probably seen a movie where a leader declares martial law, sending the military to take over a town during some crisis.
Can the governor or government really do that? Ted Haller answers in this week's Is It Legal?
Yes, the governor has the power to declare martial law. No, they can't do it whenever they want. Now, interestingly, the words martial law, they don't appear in the Minnesota Constitution. Instead, here's what the state constitution says. The governor shall be commander-in-chief of the military and naval forces and may call out such forces to execute the laws, to suppress insurrection, and to repel invasion. You're probably wondering, has that ever happened in Minnesota? Yes, and more than once. But the most important declaration was back in 1959 in Albert Lea, outside a strike at a meatpacking plant where there was some mob rule. And this is a newspaper photo of the National Guard at that plant after Governor Freeman declared martial law, calling it a state of insurrection. But a panel of federal judges said not so fast, essentially ruling that the situation in Albert Lea wasn't bad enough for martial law, explaining that in martial law, there's no freedom of press, no freedom of speech, no freedom of assembly, no freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures. The courts are closed. A warning of the power of martial law and why it should be used so very, very carefully. With Is It Legal? I'm Ted Haller.
Thank you, Anthony. Now, listening and reviewing, you notice I played that that clip in its entirety. I wanted to make sure that it was in context and you could hear the part that, hey, it's not absolute. There are limits and things like that. I wanted everybody to know that I wanted this to be completely transparent and within complete context. What's important about that clip is that we know, again, this is before George Floyd. This was just a piece on this particular topic. Is that the governor has the authority. Now, again, the phrase martial law is not in the Minnesota Constitution, but effectively, he has the ability to put down an insurrection, a word that the left has come to love over the last 3.5 years, insurrection. Now, if anybody thinks that what happened on January 6, 2021, which I thought at the time was wrong, that people should not have been entering federal property without permission. By the way, a lot of them were given permission by local law enforcement on the property. But that's a whole different story. But people walking into the Capitol like that and doing that, they should have been punished. To the extent they have been, absolutely not. The point is this: the left has become very comfortable calling that an insurrection.
They did a great job branding that.
They branded it insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you juxtapose what happened on January 6, 2021 to what happened several months earlier, about 6 months earlier in Minneapolis, and by the way, other places around the country, we're talking about Tim Walz right now, who's governor at the time. If you juxtapose that to what happened in Minnesota, with people being murdered, with countless businesses being looted, burned to the ground, assaults, and most importantly, law enforcement facilities being overrun and burned. If that does not suffice to be an insurrection in the state of Minnesota, I don't know what else would. Maybe an invasion of the Capitol there. That's fine. But when you are literally overtaking and burning law enforcement facilities, I think at that point, the governor can say, this is an insurrection. Now, why do I lay this foundation out here with that video and what an insurrection is, or what would require or justify martial law? It's because Walz is accused by many, including the mayor, another Democrat of Minneapolis, of not responding with the National Guard as requested in a timely manner. He waited 3 days. He waited until day 3 to send the National Guard, ladies and gentlemen. And he's saying, now here's what Walz said, and I should have pulled this up. We may be able to grab it. But he was saying that he couldn't send the National Guard until a request came from the mayor. That is not true. That is not true. He does not have to wait for anybody to make an official request to deploy the National Guard if he, as the commander-in-chief, deems that the National Guard is required to put down an insurrection in his state anywhere. He's not required to wait. Now, can you imagine how silly that is? That if an entire city is now taken over by any number of people, any group or organization, whatever it is, for weeks or months, things are still burning, people are being raped and murdered and assaulted, kidnapped, any level, any degree of crime is happening completely unquelled. by local authorities. You're telling me that the governor has to wait until that mayor sends a letter saying, we please send the National Guard here to quell this? Are you kidding me? This piece right here, again, I'm going to say it again. This was before George Floyd. It shows you right there, reporter did a good job, a complete job, saying the governor has the authority to institute martial law anytime he deems it necessary. Now, he could be overruled by a judge the next day saying, no, you're out of bounds. But he has the authority to make the decision without any official request. Let me tell you about the request. The request is a formality. It's something that there you go. Thank you very much for bringing that up, Anthony. Anthony is showing the text between the mayor's office and the governor's office about this. The governor said, and I'm going off script here a little bit. The governor said at one point, well, there was correspondence between the mayor's office and my office about deploying the National Guard, but it was not formal. I thought he was asking generalities. Could we send the National Guard? And we never got a formal request. So, and I'm looking at the text you're putting up there right now, but the information's all there. We're putting up there for people who can't see it. We're putting information up on the screen right now. My final point is that the governor did not have to wait for a request from the mayor to put down what he would consider or could consider an insurrection in the city of Minneapolis or anywhere else in the state. He didn't do it with all of the violence and mayhem and disregard for law enforcement officers under those circumstances. He did not use the National Guard. He's a commander-in-chief. He showed zero leadership. And this is why he is a political soulmate of Kamala Harris. She picked exactly the person who supports her philosophies and, quite frankly, supports her defiance of the rule of law. And that's what she's done. Anthony, do you want to chime in on that at all?
Again, look at because we have a few other topics to talk about, Waltz. Again, we are looking at, in November, we're voting for people who are going to lead us. We're choosing leaders, okay? We need to look back at what action they took during times of crisis or times of peace, too, and what they contributed to that, right?
Yes.
You could see clearly that he hesitated on achieving law and order, and he didn't even communicate very well with his, the mayor and stuff like that. So it clearly shows. And then again, we're going to talk about other things on the other side of his leadership abilities. So we've seen Kamala Harris, and again, like you said, you can't put a paper in between them as far as if they're, different people or different policy. They're the exact same far extreme left that just wants to devastate society for some reason.
Yes, and doesn't want us to know about it. It's going to do their best to deflect it, like you said earlier.
Exactly. They're gaslighters, okay? And we're going to see also something that is really, really disturbing.
Yes.
You see, just to bring it up, last month or a little bit longer than that, Trump was shot in the head, okay? Now, this is not a sign of leadership, or it is, but it's not as, policy wise. But what does he do immediately after going, okay, my head's still here, my limbs are still here, I'm on stage right now, people are watching me, what am I going to do? He doesn't get on a stretcher, he doesn't let himself get carried off, he gets up and puts his fist up and he says fight, right? Everybody, even Mark Zuckerberg, is like, wow, that was badass. Okay? That shows you cannot make that up. That's not a script. That's not, oh, hey, follow this, do this. If this happens, do this. No, he acted in the moment and it showed his true colors on who he is. And there's Tim Kennedy, I'll quote him loosely, is that he said that less than 1,000 people in the world would be reacting to an assassination attempt like that, and Trump is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a combat veteran and stuff like that, so he knows a lot of badass people. He gave Trump his, he commended him for that. So what I'm trying to get at is that when we see this next clip, and I want you to transition it, you're going to see what actions this guy has took during the pandemic. I won't say that word.
Yeah.
I want to get even more shadow ban,
Exactly.
So let's,
I'll set it up.
Go ahead.
So you go from, and I'm glad you gave that opportunity, Anthony. You go from the devastating riots in Minneapolis, and it took him 3 days, the governor, to get the National Guard down there. He's reluctant to do that, but he was not reluctant during the pandemic to institute some of the harshest lockdowns in any of the states. And I was in California, and I'm sure Minnesota was right up there, if not worse than California, with the lockdowns. But it wasn't just the lockdowns.
He made Gavin Newsom look like George Washington.
I think you're right on that one. I think you're right. George Washington with better hair. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is like one of the best juxtaposed videos I think that we can put up is him talking about the riots being great, whatever, and then now knowing that he could have sent the National Guard down these riots just because he was commander in chief and deemed it was necessary, and he didn't do it, at least not for the first couple of full days. To what you're going to see right now. Again, this is the lockdowns. So this shows you where this man's priorities are. These are his priorities. And he talks about, he wants a community where people can talk to each other and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff without stumping with Kamala Harris. But I want you to see what he actually did. Remember, we talked about it, and Anthony, you talked about it earlier in the podcast about basically we can listen to what people say, or we can watch what they do. We can watch their actions. So let's watch this next video here and talk about actions.
Go inside now! Get in the hell!
Get in. Oh, God, that hurt. You good? Are you okay? Right on the crotch. Are you okay? You got hit? I'm good.
So for those of you who are listening and not watching, it showed a video of law enforcement. It was actually in Minneapolis. I'd forgotten this was in Minneapolis, ironically, of law enforcement officers. They appear to be in riot gear. They appear to be. It's kind of dark. And Anthony, you can confirm or deny or whatever.
It looked like to me riot gear. Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like riot gear. They're walking down a neighborhood street with paintballs, and they are shooting at people. One of them, at least one person that we can see in the video, got shot because these people were not complying exactly with the governor's lockdown orders during the pandemic to stay in their houses. And the cops are yelling, "Get back in your house, get back in, get back in." And people who happen to be outside are being shot at, and some actually got shot with the paintballs. This is how the governor chooses to use his authority, Tim Walz, to have people comply with law enforcement under his lockdown orders during a pandemic and using force to shoot them with paintballs. Have you ever been shot with a paintball? It's not a comfortable thing. But to force them back on their homes, the same man was reluctant to put down deadly riots in Minneapolis. This is the mindset of this man. This is the mindset. I would go as far as to call him a coward, because he believed, and this is, I'm making this assessment of him based on what I've seen. He believed during the George Floyd riots that the political climate was on his side to tiptoe and tap dance around his responsibilities to arrest people who were burning down the city. He believed at the time the political winds were on his side, and so he dragged his feet and went on television and talked about how excited he was and how optimistic he was about these riots. Subsequently, he felt that the political winds were on his side about the lockdowns and that he could force people to stay in their own homes through the use of police force. This is the mindset and decision-making and philosophy of the man who wants to be number 2 in command in this country come these elections in November. And this is the person that Kamala Harris has picked to be her running mate and, yes, her political soulmate. This is what we're looking at, ladies and gentlemen. Look at what they've both done, not what they say, not what they're going to say tomorrow, next week, and next month, but what they've done. Ask yourselves if you want these two people to be running this country, and if you do, why? Anthony, I've got one more I'm going to touch on, but if you want to chime in on the paintball caper, please have at it.
No, like I said earlier, it's a stark contrast as far as putting his thumb on the people, common citizens versus the riots that were taking place. It just shows the level of pandering is just unfathomable. As far as like, I couldn't even think of doing that myself to win over people or to be in, the right spotlight that you think is, and then doing the exact opposite to just innocent people who aren't rioting and stuff. And I don't, there is some weirdness too with the officers or whoever that was in the riot gear enforcing that too. Kind of weird, that
Yes.
They actually took those orders and thought that was okay. Hey, we're going to shoot a lady that's looking outside of her door. Like that's really weird, but of course it was under his orders. So again, it goes back to him. He's the root cause of it. He's the one who's the commander in chief there saying, hey, you need to do this and that. You need to stand down here, let them burn and loot this target. Don't let this person look outside their window. It's just, I hope people really see that. And to me, it's just, again, like you said, this person wants to be number 2 in leadership. Like, I don't care if you hate Trump or if you don't like whatever political affiliation you are. It's not about Republican and Democrat this election cycle. It's literally tyranny and destruction versus order. That's what it is. Not about, oh, this person is nice and has Meg the Stallion twerking on stage, so I'm gonna vote for her. Like, please don't be idiots. Please don't be idiots. Like, I know I have zero faith in the people who have Trump derangement syndrome, too far gone. I know plenty of people like that. I can talk with them all day. I cannot talk with them about politics because they just shut down. And I know those people I know who they're going to be voting for. And there's no winning those people over, unfortunately, because they're under a spell or some type of brainwash. The people that are in the middle, the moderates that we might reach, they're going to use their brain cells and they're going to watch and they're going to see this stuff come to light and see that these two frauds are not doing interviews purposely because these questions are going to come up. They're going to go, hey, why were you shooting people with paintballs? But then a week before, I'm exaggerating, I don't know the exact time frame, you were praising the destruction of your own city. Even when your mayor is going, hey, we need help. And you're providing, here's the most important thing. You're not even from a leadership standpoint, you're not going, hey, stop this. We're going to do this, this, and that to stop the rioting. But also, let me hear what you guys are rioting about, and let me try to fix it, or at least, let's do. That's what a leader does. They talk about it, they take action, and they try out different things to help solve the issue. He did nothing of that. And he's not going to do any of that as a vice president of America. It's just going to destroy America as we know it, in my opinion. And so I'll leave it at that.
Well, my opinion as well, Anthony. And as I started the show, and it's very well said, I wanted to focus almost exclusively on the law enforcement aspect of this as it relates to both of these people. And I think we've done that. But there is one final point that I want to make. There's one aspect that I want to explore with Tim Walz. And by the way, we could do this with Kamala Harris as well. There's plenty of material on both sides. But this is very important. And this is going to be clip 6 we're going to talk about here in a second. I know a lot has been said about Tim Walz's military career. And this is not about law enforcement, but it is about leadership. I want to be very clear about this. I'm grateful to him for his 24 years in the military. Anybody who spends some time in the military, it's 2 years or 10 years or 30 years, I thank them all. I never served in the military. I did 30 years as a cop, but I was never in the military. I'm very, very grateful for anybody who volunteers or serves otherwise in the military. He did for 24 years honorably, as far as I know. Having said that, it does not mean that he has told the truth about everything. It does not mean that he is representing himself authentically about certain aspects of that. And there's a couple of things here. There's about the Iraq thing, being deployed, and did he leave on purpose before? Like, I can't get in his head. And there are a lot of people say that, hey, he knew it was coming until he split, so he wouldn't have to go overseas or wouldn't have to go into combat. Other people saying, hey, he was going to leave anyway, and just the timing looks like that. I'm not going to pretend I know the truth on that one, what's accurate. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. I want to talk about something that's much more definable, that's much more discernible, and it's much more black and white. And I think in a lot of ways is, it's egregious. And I'll tell you why from my point of view here in a minute. So if you can, Anthony, can you play a clip 6 for us real quick?
Yep.
Hope woke up like many of you did 5 weeks ago and said, Dad, you're the only person I know who's in elected office. You need to stop what's happening with this. I'll take my kick in the butt for the NRA. I spent 25 years in the Army and I hunt. And I gave the money back. And I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states. And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Stop. So, of course, he's talking to some small crowd. This is 2018. I guess he's running for governor at the time, I believe. And he's talking about his efforts to increase gun safety, basically in implementing new gun laws. He makes a very clear, very indisputable claim there that he carried the types of weapons that he wants banned. I assume he's talking about AR-15s or so-called assault rifles, things like this, assault weapons. That nobody here, as civilians, should be carrying the types of weapons that he carried into war. I'm using his or in war. I'm using his words. And you can go back and rewind that tape. That clip, watch it yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, we do know for a fact that he never served a second in combat. And by the way, most people in the military don't. I mean, that's not a slam against them. That's what I said. I'm not talking about did he leave the military because he was afraid to go overseas. I'm not asking any of that. I'm not getting his mind. But here, I can get into his own words. And he told you and me and everybody in that room and everybody in the country right now that he carried these weapons of war into war. And people say, "Oh, Mark, you're just kind of mixing words here and blah blah blah." What he meant was no. It's not that he meant, well, he was a soldier and he could have gone to war with this one and we shouldn't be carrying it. But no, he said that you shouldn't be carrying the weapons that I carried in war.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you a little comparison about how ridiculous a statement that is and how deceitful a statement like that is. Let me tell you how deceitful, and that's the word. It's deceitful. He's deceiving people. I was on the job for 30 years, and I always make a joke. About 15 years of that, I was a real cop, because then I start promoting or whatever it is. I went to lieutenant and captain, and then I wasn't a cop anymore. I was a clerical staff with a gun. Exactly. I was actually present at one officer involved shooting. I witnessed it. I was present. I was just rolling up to the scene. I was code 3. I was coming back up. I'm rolling up there at a time. This is before ABS. I'm in my 1995 Mustang, probably. Slam the brakes, coming up to the standoff on the freeway. All lanes blocked, and we have a suicidal person. We found out later on suicidal, but someone there with a gun. And highway patrol is spread out. Got this person at bay. Drop the gun. The calls are going out. I'm rolling up there. Slam. I unholster my weapons. I'm throwing my driver's side door open. I'm getting out, drawing, and then bam, 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 bam. Because this guy had put his sights on the officers and me, obviously everybody down range. And before I could get my finger on my trigger, my colleagues unloaded and ended the life of this person. It turns out it was a suicide by cop thing. Later on, I didn't fire my weapon. I've never been involved in an officer-involved shooting. I'm grateful for that. I never had to take anyone's life. I was never in a position where I was thought that I thought I was going to die a couple of times, but not as a result of officer-involved shooting. But I was there. That was about as close as I ever got. If I ever told anybody that I was involved in an officer-involved shooting, it would be deceitful, because it's completely distinguishable. Being present at an officer-involved shooting or being involved in an officer-involved shooting. They could not be more night and day. And if I ever said, yeah, I was involved in an officer-involved shooting, I'll tell you about later on, blah, 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 whatever. There's no history. There's no documentation of me ever being involved in an officer-involved shooting, because I never was. I was a witness. I was interviewed. I never had to fire my weapon during the course of an enforcement contact in 30 years.
At least you were there, though.
I was.
You know what I mean? You had your boots on the ground there.
I was there.
Yeah.
I did show up. I didn't retire the day before. So when you say something like that you carried your weapon in war, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, see, there are men and women who were in combat, who have been in combat, who have lugged that weapon in the field of combat, who have taken lives, whose lives have been taken, who have defended their colleagues, who have defended civilians, who've lost limbs. See, those are the people who've carried their weapons into war. And as a 24-year veteran, not the word, he wasn't in combat, but as a 24-year member, an honorable member of the military, Tim Walz should, one, know better, and number two, should know the implications of telling someone you carried a weapon into war, into battle. That is a lie. It's deceitful, and it's there to garner political favor. And to my knowledge, as of recording this podcast today, I don't know if he's ever changed the words or clarified that. Maybe he has. I don't think that he has. If he has, so be it. But he said it then, and he knew that he was not telling the truth when he said it 6 years ago. And by the way, that's the one clip. He has said it other times as well about carrying his weapon in war. So there's an article here about that, and I'm not going to read it because it's kind of redundant about this clip, but it's clear he knew what he was saying. I believe he knew what he was saying. It's clear to me. The reason I say it's clear to me is because I've never told anybody I was involved in officer involved shooting, and I've seen officers, by the way, more than once. But that's the most relevant time in regards to this podcast. I've witnessed officers fire their weapons in self-defense and protection of their colleagues, and I've seen a life taken right before my eyes, and I have my weapon unholstered. And I never told anybody I was involved in an officer-involved shooting. Never in my life. Because even though it's just a hair's difference, it's a world apart from the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Tim, I know it. Tim Walz should know it. And this is the kind of person who wants to be number 2 in charge of the executive branch of this country. He wants to be Kamala Harris's right-hand man. And they are political soulmates, and we are in for a world of hurt if somehow these two sneak into the White House. So I want you to do, like Anthony said, think with your brain, think with your emotions, look at what people do, not what they say, not what they tell you they're going to do. Look at their track history, look at their track record, look at their history, and ask yourself, would we be better off with these two knuckleheads than we were 4 or 5 or 6 years ago? You can call them what you want to. Call them the other knucklehead. I don't care. But look at what was done under the previous administration, not this current one, the previous one, and look at what these two have done in their respective roles over their government careers. Ask yourself that question. Who is likely to bring more rule of law, prosperity, and a return to civility in this country as far as our communities are concerned? Ask yourself that question, and then we have to let the dice roll where they may. Anthony, I'm going to give you a final word on that, and we're going to go and wind this one down.
Yeah, Mark, I've known you for a while now, and you've never told that story to me. And I know why. You just said you didn't see yourself being involved in that shooting, which I totally understand and I respect that. That's good. But I want people, I just want to let people know that. And I want people to have the perspective on this, on Tim Walz or even Kamala Harris, but mainly Tim Walz. There's people like him in everybody's life. You have that old friend that used to, bull crap you and say this and that, and you start putting things together and you go, wait, why would they even lie about that? Are they trying to look cool? Are they trying to get some type of social status from me, or are they doing it for their own ego? I don't know, but I don't want to hang out with this person anymore. I can't believe what they say. They don't follow through on the things that they do say that they're going to do and things like that. And we distance ourselves from those people naturally if you're an honest person, because you cannot, like you said, kind of like birds of a feather flock together, and that is just a different bird than you. And so you go, okay, I'm not going to hang out with this person. I'm not going to talk with this person. And that's who Tim Walz is. He's a person that just says things and to win people over. And I want people to have that perspective. And you have, on the other hand, you have Trump, which some people hate him. Even people who are voting for him hate him. But guess what? He's always going to be that person that's in your life. It could be your uncle. For me, it's my uncle, one of my uncles. A lot of people don't like him because he's too honest. But guess what? You call him when you need something done. You call him when you need help. You call him when you need to rely on him, because you know that he's going to be there. And he may not tell you the things that you want to hear, but he's going to tell you the things that you need to hear, and he's going to help you get things done. And that's who Trump is in our life. And you have one side, Tim Walz, Kamala Harris, are the people that you naturally distance yourself from because they're pardon my language, bullshitters. And that's just how it is. So we need to vote according to how we operate in our daily lives. We got to stop with the fantasy. We got to stop with the, oh, they say nice things, they did this and that. You have to look at their actions. You have to look at what they're saying and how they're gaslighting people and how they lead. They don't lead. We have Trump on the other side. And again, you don't have to agree with everything he says, but he's going to be the person in your life that you call when you need help. And that's who he's going to be for us as a people for the United States. And so I just want people to have that objective view and think about it in that way. So I'll leave it at that.
Well said, my friend. I love it, Anthony. I couldn't agree more. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Hey, listen, if you want to be a part of the change here, help save America, hey, click the button, subscribe. If you like what you heard, if you hate what you heard, subscribe, because you can come back and you can send me all kinds of vile stuff and I'll respond to you the best I can. But subscribe. Be a part of the change. Do something that helps us a lot. If you like what you hear, if you got a friend who should be hearing this, get them to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Instagram, wherever you find us on social platforms. Every little bit helps. It really makes a difference. We need to get the word out. And I think we're going to have some, maybe some non-political shows coming to you pretty soon. Hopefully, we're working on some good ones for you. Some deep in the weeds police officer stories I think you'll find very intriguing and very powerful as soon as we can. Work on this right now. But we will get back to the political aspect of the rule of law as we get closer to the election. But we thank you for listening. We have a great audience, very, very loyal, very deep, and we want to make it wider and wider and wider. If you believe in what we're saying, help us to do that. You are the force that makes it work. Thank you to all of you. Anthony, thanks for being a co-host today, and thanks for doing a great job producing. God bless you all. We'll see you next time here on your Leo Nation.